The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Evelyn Blake blinked, momentarily disoriented, as the check-in coordinator glanced again at the tablet, then shook her head. "This is for the Next Gen Private Equity Summit, correct?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady. She pulled the lapel of her black blazer slightly straighter. "Yes, ma'am," the woman said, polite but firm, "and I'm afraid you're not registered under any panel or guest category." Evelyn looked past the table to the towering glass doors behind her. Inside, warm lighting spilled onto marble floors, and the familiar blue banners of Blake Carter Holdings framed the entrance. She had helped design those banners. She had proofread every line of the keynote address. Somewhere beyond the lobby, her father, Richard Blake, was likely already inside. Lauren, too, her half-sister, the new face of the firm. Evelyn reached for her phone and quickly texted him. "Check-in says I'm not on the list. Please confirm?" It took 2 minutes for the reply to come. 2 full minutes of standing awkwardly beside the check-in table, nodding politely at passing executives she half knew. Then the message blinked on screen. "Don't worry about it. Lauren will represent the family today. Just head back and relax. No greeting, no apology, no explanation." Evelyn didn't move. She stared at the text, the pit in her stomach spreading like ink in water. After everything, after the meetings, the planning calls, the nights reviewing term sheets, she was now uninvited. The event they had co-sponsored, the stage she helped secure. A security guard opened the main doors for a group of arriving partners, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of Lauren in a sapphire dress, surrounded by press, smiling brightly. Evelyn stepped back from the check-in table, the hotel's air conditioning suddenly too cold against her arms. She turned, walked toward the glass exit, and as the door hissed open, she didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just whispered under her breath, "I helped build this summit," and nobody in the room turned around. The drive back to her apartment was silent. Evelyn didn't turn on the radio. She didn't call anyone. She let the silence fill every inch of the space, just like the hollowness spreading inside her chest. Denver's skyline blurred behind her windshield. The same city she had moved to 10 years ago, when the firm was still operating out of a cramped office over a downtown print shop. Back when she and her father used to stay up late drafting pitch decks and cold emailing investors. Back when she still believed her effort meant something. Evelyn parked the car but didn't get out. Her fingers traced the leather trim on the steering wheel, then paused at the edge of the scarf she always kept tucked in the passenger seat. Her mother's scarf. Faded green with stitched initials EB, a birthday gift from the year before the cancer took her. Her mother had once told her, "You don't need applause to know you're doing it right." Evelyn believed her. For a long time, she believed it enough to stay quiet, to keep building in the shadows. After her mother's funeral, while Lauren was still learning to spell acquisition, Evelyn was rewriting the firm's post-recession restructuring strategy. When the company nearly went under in 2009, it was Evelyn who brokered the silent bailout deal with Carter Grant Capital, a deal she wasn't allowed to sign publicly, because family politics are delicate, her father had said. And every time she handed off a deck, or redlined a legal term sheet, Richard would give her a nod. That was all. Just a nod, like you'd give to someone delivering coffee on time. She never complained, never asked to be on the masthead. She told herself, as long as the company lives, I've done my job. But slowly, the little things changed. Invitations started going only to Lauren. Her photo disappeared from the internal website. She was told to use a personal email for official edits just to simplify things. She chalked it up to transitions, to staying behind the curtain. But tonight wasn't a curtain. It was a locked door. Evelyn finally stepped out of the car, walked up to her second-floor unit, and dropped her purse on the kitchen counter. The apartment was clean, minimal, intentionally impersonal. A place she came to sleep and work, not to feel anything. She poured herself a glass of water, took a sip, then stared at the sink as tears welled up, quiet, tired ones. She wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired of being invisible to the people she gave everything to. Her phone buzzed again. Lauren had posted a photo from the summit, a group shot on stage, captioned, "The future of finance is female number, next gen number, Blake Carter Holdings." Evelyn stared at it for a long time. She wasn't angry. But something inside her had started to move. 2 days after the summit, Evelyn sat alone in the office on Spear Boulevard she'd leased to serve as her consulting base. It wasn't much, just a glass door with her name etched in small lettering and a desk with a single orchid on it, but it gave her space to breathe. She was sorting through old tax forms when she noticed the envelope. It wasn't addressed, just placed between 2 outdated files, as if it had been slipped there deliberately. The logo on the top left was faint, Union Forward Capital. She furrowed her brow. She hadn't done business with them in years. She opened it. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. A loan guarantee agreement. A $750,000 line of credit, issued under Blake Carter Holdings Innovation Fund, and her name, Evelyn G. Blake, was listed as the personal guarantor. She blinked, flipped the pages. There was a signature. It looked like hers, perfectly fluid, confident, but it wasn't hers. She knew it wasn't. The date on the document was the 8th of April, 2 years ago. Evelyn had been in Galway, Ireland that weekend, attending a conference on sustainable venture capital. She even had the passport stamps to prove it. Her pulse quickened. She scanned further and saw the name of the startup, Mistral BioWare, a biotech venture Richard had mentioned once soon, that tanked before its product reached clinical trials. She'd had no part in it, no meetings, no access to the pitch. But the paper said otherwise. It hit her then, not just what had happened, but how it had happened. 2 years ago, she remembered Richard calling her into his home office on a quiet Saturday. "I need your signature on a few compliance docs," he'd said casually, handing her a manila folder. "We're standardizing our silent board paperwork, routine stuff." She hadn't read every page. She was late for a dinner with an old friend. He'd stood over her as she signed. She hadn't thought twice. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just the signature. It was the orchestration, the planning, the audacity. She stood from her desk, suddenly cold. They hadn't just erased her from the narrative. They had used her name, her identity, to finance their failures, and then pushed her into the shadows while they smiled for cameras. She grabbed the document, took photos of every page, and texted her attorney. "Margaret, I need you. Urgent. Fraud suspected." Signature forged. Margaret replied in under 5 minutes. "Come to my office in an hour. Bring everything." An hour later, Evelyn sat across from Margaret Kessler, her longtime legal advisor. A sharp, composed woman in her early 50s, Margaret had been with Evelyn through early corporate filings and quiet equity negotiations. She had never seen her this still. "This signature," Margaret said, scanning the file. "It's practiced, familiar. Someone who's copied you before. Maybe even had you sign something clean, then used a copy to overlay on new forms." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I think it was Dad. He gave me something to sign 2 years ago, told me it was internal paperwork. I didn't check it carefully." Margaret didn't flinch. "We'll need to prove you were out of the country. Passport, flight records." "I have them." "What about access to this loan?" "No access, no involvement. I didn't even know this fund existed. Margaret set the folder down. This isn't just family betrayal anymore, she said quietly. This is felony, level fraud. The words echoed in the room. Felony. Fraud. Family. Evelyn clenched her jaw. It wasn't the money. It was the principle. The deception. The casual way they had decided her identity could be a placeholder for their recklessness. They hadn't forgotten her. They'd exploited her. That realization burned hotter than anything else. No more quiet. No more sidelines. No more asking for a seat at the table. They were about to learn what happened when the girl they trained to be invisible finally looked them in the eye. The envelope was thicker than most. Hand-delivered, no return address. Just her name, printed neatly in all caps. Evelyn knew before she opened it. She waited until evening, when the city outside had dulled to shadows and the only light in her apartment came from the lamp over her kitchen table. She slid her finger under the seal and unfolded the contents. There were 4 pages. The legal tone was cold, stripped of emotion. Words like restructure, conflict of interest, and transitional leadership alignment danced between paragraphs. But Evelyn only needed to read one line. Effective immediately, Evelyn Blake is removed from all internal governance access and executive advisory participation within Blake Carter Holdings. She flipped to the final page. The signature at the bottom wasn't Lauren's, it was Richard's. Dated 3 weeks ago, the same night she stayed up late revising the expansion slide deck. The silence in the room deepened, like pressure pushing in from all sides. Evelyn sat back in her chair, arms limp at her sides. The paper slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. She wasn't surprised. Not really. But that didn't dull the sting. They had planned this. While she was still believing she had a role, while she was making herself small to keep things running smoothly, they had already decided to cut her out. Not loudly, not cruelly, just efficiently, quietly, cleanly. And they hadn't even given her the courtesy of a conversation. Evelyn stood, her legs stiff, and walked to the window. Below, headlights passed in streaks. People going to dinner, to dates, to lives where trust hadn't been used as a weapon. She pressed her forehead to the glass. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly hollow, not angry, not even hurt, just emptied. She thought of her mother, of that scarf she kept in her drawer, of how proud she had once been to carry the family name. She thought of the little girl she used to be wide-eyed, eager, willing to please. The one who believed that if you just worked hard enough, you'd be seen. Evelyn slid down to the floor, knees pulled to her chest, and sat there for hours. No tears, no drama, just stillness, just silence. And in that silence, something inside her finally snapped loose, not like a break, but like a release. She would never be that girl again. It was Margaret who found the clause. She called late the next evening, voice calm but carrying a quiet undercurrent of urgency. I went back through the 2006 Articles of Incorporation, she said. You're not just listed as an early advisor. You're listed as a structural co-architect. Evelyn blinked. That was 15 years ago. Margaret didn't hesitate. And it was never revoked, which means the phantom equity clause is still valid. Evelyn sat up straighter. That clause, Margaret continued, gives you legal claim to advisory voting rights unless you were notified in writing, which, I assume, you never were. No, Evelyn said. No letter. No notice. Just that envelope. Margaret exhaled slowly. Then they've made a mistake. A costly one. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Not adrenaline, not fury, focus. She spent the next 48 hours quietly reviewing files, contracts, memos, board minutes. She didn't post, she didn't text, she simply worked. On the third day, she met Margaret at a private conference room inside a boutique law firm overlooking Cheeseman Park. Margaret arrived with 2 printed portfolios, a laptop, and a quiet nod of confidence. "This is the strategy," she said, spreading the documents across the table. "You trigger a motion under Clause 4C of the Founders' Rights Agreement. That lets you freeze discretionary spending tied to your original financial model." "You mean the revolving credit line?" Margaret nodded. "The one they use for quarterly liquidity. Without it, they'll stall." Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. "I'm ready," she said. That afternoon, Margaret filed the freeze order. It was signed under Evelyn's full legal authority. By the next morning, she received a flurry of quiet alerts. The firm's weekly payroll had delayed by 48 hours. Vendor payments were pending. The expansion project in Austin paused. Lauren's assistant had even emailed, confused. "Is this a glitch in the system? We can't process capital allocations." Evelyn didn't respond. Instead, she drafted a single internal notice, time-stamped and archived. Per Founders Clause 4C, financial operations linked to my original growth framework have been temporarily suspended for legal review. EB. There were no public announcements, no press releases, no dramatic takedowns. But inside the boardroom, the air had changed. Evelyn had been silent for years. Now her signature was louder than any speech. The ballroom at the Denver Civic Club gleamed under low chandeliers, marble floors, gold trim, and a guest list curated months in advance. The occasion was the Blake Carter Holdings Investment Gala celebration of their strongest quarter in 6 years. Evelyn wasn't invited, but she came anyway. She stepped out of the black town car without fanfare. No one recognized her at first. Black satin gown, hair pulled back, no jewelry, no flair, just presence. Inside, waitstaff drifted like ghosts between crystal flutes and murmured laughter. The energy was self-congratulatory champagne bubbles and polished PR. At the center stage stood Lauren, in silver sequins, her voice echoing through the speaker system. "This past year," she said, "has tested our adaptability. But we endured, we recalibrated, and we thrived because we stayed true to our values." The crowd nodded. Some clapped. Others watched her over rimmed glasses. Evelyn waited until the lights dimmed for the next segment in investor recognition presentation. Then she stepped forward. She didn't need permission. As she walked across the floor, conversations faltered, faces turned, whispers fluttered from corner to corner like dropped napkins. Lauren froze mid-sentence. "Evelyn?" she said, the mic still live. Her smile didn't quite hold. Evelyn took the final step onto the stage and gently removed the microphone from Lauren's hand. "I'll only take a moment," she said calmly. No protest. No one moved to stop her. Behind her, the projection screen was still on. Evelyn handed a small flash drive to the tech assistant near the AV booth. "Play it," she said. The screen flickered. Then document after document rolled in silence. Financial models signed by Evelyn Blake, restructuring strategies attributed to EB, approval stamps dated years before Lauren joined full-time, emergency loan frameworks, expansion maps, and finally, a notarized copy of the Phantom Equity Clause, complete with Evelyn's name in permanent print. She let the images speak. She didn't narrate. She didn't even look back. Then she turned to the audience. "I was told I had no seat at the table," she said softly. "That I wasn't part of the new direction. But as you've just seen, I wasn't part of the plan. I was the plan. A pause. The kind that stiffens suits. Lauren opened her mouth, closed it, her fingers gripped the podium like it was drifting away. From the back of the room, Elijah Grant, the CEO of Carter Grant Capital, rose slowly. I want to go on record, he said, voice steady. This firm would not be where it is without Evelyn Blake. Her vision, her decisions, and her risk tolerance are the reason our capital remained here through the downturn. That landed like a stone in water. Evelyn nodded once. I'm not here to reclaim a spotlight, she continued, only to correct the record. She stepped back from the mic. The room stood frozen, torn between admiration and discomfort. But no one clapped. Not yet. Then, from the corner of the room, a slow pair of hands broke the silence. One of the investors, then another, then a third. No roar, no ovation. Just a steady rhythm that said, "We see you now." Evelyn left the stage without glancing at Lauren, without looking for her father. She walked past them as if they were furniture in a house she no longer lived in. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about returning the truth to the center of the room where it had been missing for far too long. She left the gala before the band resumed and the wine started flowing again. Before anyone had the chance to approach her with late apologies or carefully curated praise. She stepped out into the Denver night, heels tapping against stone, silence wrapping around her like armor. In her clutch was a printed copy of the Phantom Equity Clause. Not for show, just as a reminder that the truth doesn't vanish just because others choose not to see it. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just drove home. The next morning, her inbox held a single message from the Blake Carter Legal Department. The subject line read, "Request for clarification on founder status. No apology, no explanation." Just an attempt to rewrite the rules now that they knew she still had the pen. She didn't reply. Instead, Evelyn brewed a cup of coffee black, no sugar, and walked barefoot onto her small balcony. The city below was waking up. Office lights blinked on. Cars inched down Colfax. The ordinary world resumed, unaware of the quiet revolution that had happened the night before. She sat down, legs crossed, mug warm in her hands. This wasn't triumph. This wasn't vindication. It was something quieter, stillness after the storm. And in that stillness, Evelyn saw her life more clearly than she ever had. She thought about her father not with rage, but with a kind of distant sorrow. Some people inherit power and hold it tightly. Others build power and let it speak for itself. He had chosen the first. She had become the second. Evelyn stood, went back inside, and retrieved an old family photo from the back of her closet. The edges were curling, but the image still held. Her, at 16, standing beside Richard in front of their first office, smiling like she belonged. She placed it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because it no longer needed to be displayed. Later that day, she composed a short message to the company's internal board network. No legal jargon, no accusations. Just this: truth doesn't need volume, only presence. I'm not here to rewrite history. I'm here to make sure it can't be erased. She pressed send. And just like that, the past no longer held her hostage. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't a headline or a courtroom. It's a quiet woman, sitting at her own table, holding her name with both hands and never letting it go again. If you've ever felt pushed aside by the very people who were supposed to lift you up, if your silence was mistaken for weakness, if you've had to fight just to be seen, then you know this wasn't just Evelyn's story. It was all of ours. Because family betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slam doors. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in forgotten names, in locked boardrooms. But here's the truth. Your worth doesn't disappear just because someone else refuses to see it. And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own fight to reclaim your voice, subscribe. This channel is a home for stories like these. Stories that aren't just heartwarming, they're soul rebuilding. So stay, watch more. And remember, you don't need permission to take your seat at the table. You just need the courage to pull the chair out and sit.